Alrighty, well, hello, you guys. This is our last lesson for our discussion of air pollution and solutions. So I know over the last couple days you've been watching some videos and filling out notes on air pollution. So this is just kind of our last lesson, our summary, if you will, before you guys take your quiz. So we'll just go ahead and dive in. Our essential question is a very basic one, which is basically, right, why is air pollution bad? And hopefully you're able to answer this question a little bit based off of what you learned so far, okay? And at the end of this video, hopefully you're definitely able to answer this question. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first one we're going to talk about, just as you have learned in some of our previous videos, is on outdoor air pollution. So the source of almost all outdoor air pollution is what we call emissions. And emissions are anything that's being released out into the open, right? So these are emissions from vehicle exhaust. These are emissions from industries and energy plants, okay? And these are even emissions from animals. Methane, if you haven't heard of methane, methane is basically animal farts. And if you look over here, a human only releases about 0.12 kilograms of methane. But then if you go over to Western cattle, they produce 120 kilograms of methane per animal or human per year. That is a lot of methane, okay? And methane is a greenhouse gas, which, as you learned in a previous video, contributes to global warming and the greenhouse effect. So methane is a very big pollutant. It's a big emission, all right? And Western cattle, as opposed to non-Western cattle, I mean, they literally produce twice the methane. That's a human product, that Western cattle. All right. So one of the results of pollution is smog. And again, smog was something mentioned in a previous lesson. And essentially what smog is just this thick brownish haze that's formed when certain gases in the air, those gases react with sunlight. Okay, so it can take an area that looks like this nice sunny city and turn it into this smog-ridden place. And a major component of smog is actually ozone. And you learned about ozone when we talked about the ozone hole, right? And ozone is a good thing up in our atmosphere. But ozone that's close to the ground that forms, this is called bad ozone or ground level ozone. And it is not great. And it is toxic, essentially. Okay, so major component. An example of this, all right, this image was taken in December of 1952 when London was trapped in a deadly cloud of fog and pollution for 5 days, right? And you might think, oh, 5 days isn't that much, but at the time, the city, it ran on cheap coal for everything from generating power to heating homes. And so something called an anticyclone caused cold air to kind of get trapped over London. And all of those gases, the sulfur dioxide, the carbon dioxide, the smoke particles, they just kind of built up and they ended up killing 12,000 people in 5 days. 12,000 people in London in 5 days because of this smog. All right. And since then, something called a clean air bill have passed, and that's to make sure that the air stays as safe and smog free as possible to avoid these kinds of things happening. All right. So that's one kind of result of air pollution. Another is acid rain. Now, acid rain is something that we've talked about several times. We've talked about it this school year, and you guys also learned about it last school year. And acid rain is just precipitation that is more acidic than normal, okay? And acid rain forms when you have these pollutants that end up mixing with clouds in the air And to kind of simplify the process, those chemicals, they change, they get deposited in the water, and that ends up coming back down to earth as wet deposition. So that could be rain, snow, sleet, or what have you, but it's more acidic than normal rain. Okay, what do acids do? They can acidify water and kill aquatic animals in plants. They can acidify soil and kill land plants. And they also can damage stone and even metals. They can cause metals to rust and corrode more quickly because of the acidity in the rain. So, not great, right? So, those are two of our kind of major um, results from outdoor air pollution, but obviously we talked about some other results as well, right? Ozone depletion, um, global warming from the greenhouse gases. Those are all results from this air pollution. Okay. Now, one thing we haven't talked about is this indoor air pollution, right? We think a lot about outdoors, but what about indoors? Most of our life is actually spent indoors, and there are pollutants there. The first one I want to talk about is called carbon monoxide. Not carbon dioxide, but carbon monoxide. And carbon monoxide is colorless and odorless. It's pretty tough to find something that has no color and no smell, right? And what happens is carbon monoxide, it forms when fuels don't burn completely. And so any home that's heated by wood, coal, oil, or gas, they have to monitor for carbon monoxide because this can build up. It can build up and it is toxic. It will kill you if it builds up to a certain level. Another one is radon. And radon is also colorless and odorless, but it's also radioactive. And it naturally forms certain rocks underground. They release this radon, and it can enter through, cracks in the basement, cracks in foundation, things of that nature. And if you are inhaling radon over long periods of time, that can result in lung cancer and other health problems. So that's a dangerous pollutant. Those are just two. Are they the only ones? Absolutely not. Okay. And this is an important infographic because think about most of our lives, 90% of our lives are spent indoors. And when we think about pollution concentration, 2 to 5 times more pollution is going to be indoors, inside your home, than outside. And again, some of those common indoor pollutants, we talked about carbon monoxide and radon, but some other ones are, just those particulate matter, right? From exhaust, dust, smoke, all those other sources. You also have pollutants from building materials, furniture. When you cook, you're releasing things into the air, smoking. When you're painting inside, all of those things, odors, gases, cooking, cleaning, especially cleaners, those are all pollutants. Ozone can be found inside, as well as carbon dioxide, and that carbon monoxide that is deadly. So it's important to think about not just outdoor air quality, but also indoor air quality as well. Houseplants are actually a great way to improve your indoor air quality because a lot of those houseplants actually absorb those pollutants and they're creating oxygen. So they're good things to have in the home. So what can you do? What can you do? We know air pollution is not going away, but how can we help limit it? It's important to remember that most pollution, where does it come from? It comes from burning fuels for energy, and it comes from transportation. Remember, the whole coming from transportation, what are those cars and things doing? They're burning fuels for energy. So really it would be the fuels for energy. So what are some things that you personally can do to limit your energy consumption? Because that's the bottom line, right? Energy. Just think about your everyday energy consumption in your home, right? If you don't need a light, turn it off. If you don't need the air to be super cool, right? turn it up. Or the opposite, right? If you're in a cold environment and you're okay with being a little colder instead of being warm, right? Turn the air down. Things like that. Those save a lot of energy. Also thinking about transportation. And this can be kind of hard because we don't live in a city per se, so we kind of depend on vehicles. But if you can, at any opportunity, ride your bike, right? Or take public transportation. Both of those are going to limit your individual footprint. And remember when we talked about like cities and things like that, how they use less energy per person? A lot of that does have to do with transportation, because a lot of people use public transit like metros, subways, buses, things like that. And so they're going to use less energy on transportation than you and I would. Okay. Those are just a few things, but let's take a look at this graphic too. So here, what's good? You could use a ceiling fan in your room to feel cooler instead of turning down the AC, right? You can close the blinds and curtains. That's going to reduce the amount of heat that gets into the home. Turn off any unused lights and electronics. Delay washers and dishwashers to run overnight. Make sure you aren't washing your clothes in hot water. Wash them in cold water. That uses less energy, right? Because warm water has to be heated and that requires energy. Cooking outdoors to keep your home from warming up too much, that can also help. Avoid taking showers. That's during like prime energy consumption time. So I actually thought was really interesting when I read it. So avoid taking showers between 3 and 7 p.m. because that's when the majority of energy consumption is happening. So you can kind of reduce yours by choosing an alternate time. Having your AC set to 78 degrees or basically as high as you can handle. So in my home, we kind of do this during the day. We'll set it to 78 to 80 degrees. And then at nighttime, when we want to be cooler when we're going to bed, we'll turn it down a bit. But we try to keep it at a higher temperature during the day. And just trying not to rely on those electronics as much as you do. That's going to reduce your energy consumption. And at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? Because we want to limit the air pollution. The air pollution is what causes a lot of those negative health effects that we see in people, especially in highly industrialized places. So what did we learn? We learned about outdoor air pollution. Two major results of that would be smog and acid rain. We also learned about indoor air pollution and carbon monoxide and radon, as well as other pollutants that we can find both indoors and outdoors. And we also discussed some things that you can do to reduce air pollution and reduce your individual energy consumption. And it can be hard making the transition. It can, but as soon as you get into the habit of doing that, a little can go a long way. Kind of like using your reusable bags at the grocery store. It can take a while until you remember to bring them every time, but once you do, it's a nice habit to have. Okay? So this is it on air pollution. Next, we're going to talk about water pollution and what we can do to stem or stop that and where those pollutants come from. After you're done with this lesson, you will need to go ahead and take a quiz on air pollution. Do not forget to take the quiz because you do not get excused from quizzes or tests. Remember that. All right? As always, if you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you in our next video lesson.